The night was a masterpiece of quiet poetry, the kind of night that feels almost suspended in time. The full moon hung low above the vast fields, painting the land in silver. The wind whispered through the bamboo grove, carrying the scent of rain and memory. And on the edge of a small wooden bridge sat Deep, her silhouette fragile yet steadfast against the river's glow. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the water that shimmered like liquid glass beneath the moonlight. Behind her, James stood in silence. For a long moment, he said nothing. He only watched the woman who had altered the course of his life, not through power, not through promise, but through quiet resilience. There had been a time when he ruled over boardrooms, a man of status, ambition, and wealth. His name carried weight, his future was mapped with precision, until it all collapsed, like a sandcastle swept away by an unexpected tide. Betrayal, he realized, never comes from strangers. It comes from those you trust. And when the people closest to him turned their backs, James fell hard and fast. The empire he built dissolved overnight. What remained was a man stripped of pride, but perhaps, for the first time, closer to truth. And in that darkness, he met Deep, a woman whose life was simple yet rich in ways money could never measure. Her eyes held kindness without condition. Her laughter could soften the sharpest ache. And her heart, unguarded, patient, and steady, became his refuge. He approached her quietly that night, the moonlight catching in her hair. Deep, he said softly, almost afraid the wind might steal the word from him. She turned, her gaze questioning, hopeful, but also heavy with the fear of what she already knew was coming. He took a deep breath. The life you deserve, he began, his voice trembling, isn't the one I can give you right now. Her lips parted, but no sound came. For a moment, the river seemed to hold its breath. She had feared this day, though she never spoke of it. Women like her, who loved men from worlds so different, learned early that goodbyes often arrived disguised as promises. But she wanted to believe their story would be different. "How long will you be gone?" she whispered. "I don't know," he admitted, his eyes downcast. "But I promise you this, I'll come back. And when I do, I'll marry you. We'll have a home, a real one. A place where little Nhi can grow up surrounded by laughter instead of fear. Where you'll never have to wake at dawn to sell vegetables just to survive." The moonlight danced in Deep's eyes, catching the tears she tried to hide. She wanted to believe him, and part of her did. But another part, the one that had seen life's quiet cruelties, was terrified. Time, she knew, was rarely kind to women who waited. James reached into his pocket and drew out a small silver ring. It wasn't costly or ornate, but it gleamed with something far rarer. Sincerity. He slipped it gently onto her finger. "This," he whispered, "is my promise." Deep looked down at the ring, then up at him. "Don't make me wait too long, James." "I won't," he said with a faint smile, though in his heart, uncertainty tightened its grip. As he walked away, his footsteps grew faint, swallowed by the hum of the night. Deep pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the echo of his warmth fade. The wind picked up, scattering the scent of wildflowers across the fields. "Will time really wait for us?" she whispered. The river carried her question away, and somewhere beyond the horizon, James felt it too. Days blurred into weeks, and weeks quietly folded into months. The village carried on with its familiar rhythm, roosters crowing at dawn, children laughing on their way to school, the rustle of morning wind through the leaves. But for Deep, time had stopped the moment James left. Each morning, she awoke before sunrise. Her first instinct, to glance at the phone by her bedside. Maybe today, she thought. Maybe there would be a message, a call, a sign that the distance between them was not endless. But the screen remained still. Silent as the empty space beside her pillow. So she filled the silence with work. In the small garden behind her house, she tended to rows of onions, lemongrass, and cabbages. The earth was steady beneath her fingers, patient in ways the heart could never be. On good days, she sold her vegetables at the market, her smile faint but unwavering. On bad days, she simply sat by the window, watching the rain trace paths down the glass, wondering if James was looking at the same sky. Little NHI, now older, curious, and full of questions, would tug at her sleeve. "Mom, when will Uncle James come back?" Deep would smile softly, hiding the tremor in her voice. "Soon, sweetheart. He's working hard so we can have a better life." But as months turned to years, even that word, soon, began to sound fragile. Like a promise stretched too thin across time. Far away, James was fighting his own battle. The city lights burned bright around him, yet he felt more lost than ever. The business he tried to rebuild demanded everything: money, time, and sleepless nights. Often, he fell asleep at his desk, clutching a worn photograph of Deep and NHI smiling in the sun. He thought of calling her many times, but what could he say? That he was still struggling? That the dream he left to chase was still beyond his reach? He wanted to return not as a broken man, but as someone who could protect her, who deserved her faith. Meanwhile, back in the village, Deep was changing too. The young woman who once leaned on James's strength was now standing on her own. She helped others in the market, advised neighbors on growing better crops, and slowly became a pillar of her community. Yet each evening, as she sat by the old bridge, she still looked toward the horizon. Sometimes she imagined seeing him walking toward her, his smile, his voice, the warmth she missed. But when she blinked, it was only the mist rising from the river. Months later, a letter arrived. James's handwriting, faint but unmistakable. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Deep, I know it's been too long. Every day without you and NHI feels like a lifetime. I've been rebuilding everything I lost because I don't want to come back empty-handed. But sometimes, I wonder, am I losing what truly matters while chasing what I once had? If time could wait, I'd ask it to stop, just so I could come home sooner. Please don't lose faith in me. I will return, and when I do, I'll keep the promise I made under the old bridge. James. Her tears fell freely. She could almost hear his voice in the words, tired but filled with love. She pressed the letter to her chest and whispered to the night, James, I don't need riches. I just need you home. That same night, under the same moon, James made his decision. The next morning, he walked away from $1 million contract. His business partner was furious. You're throwing away everything, maybe, James said softly. But sometimes love is the only thing worth losing everything for. He packed his suitcase, leaving behind the city that once defined him. He wasn't chasing success anymore. He was chasing home. The drive back was long and quiet. The mist rolled across the fields like a curtain of memory. Every turn, every tree, every glimpse of the river carried him closer to what he had lost, and to what he hoped still waited. When he finally reached the village, 2 years had passed. He slowed by the old bridge, their bridge, and the memory hit him like thunder. Her voice, her promise, her tears under the moonlight. Would she still be waiting? He parked near her house and stepped out. The garden was lush, full of vegetables and wildflowers. And then, a sound that made his breath hitch. A little girl's laughter. NHI, he whispered, his voice cracking. The girl turned, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. Uncle James, she shouted, running toward him. He dropped to his knees, catching her in his arms. You've grown so much, he whispered, his voice trembling. You're so beautiful, she giggled. Mom said you were working far away. She said one day you'd come back. He smiled through tears. And I did. At that moment, Deep appeared at the doorway. She froze, breathless, stunned, her eyes glistening in disbelief. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to pause. Then she stepped forward, cautious but certain. "James," she whispered. He rose slowly, every heartbeat echoing with 2 years of silence. "I told you I'd come back," he said, his voice breaking. "It just took me longer than I wanted." "You could have come back with nothing," she said softly. "I never needed the house or the money." "I just needed you, I know," he murmured. "But I needed to be someone worthy of holding your hand again." She shook her head gently, tears glistening. "You never lost me, James. You only lost time." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small velvet box, old, worn, yet still beautiful. Inside lay the same silver ring. "Deep," he said, voice trembling, "I left with a promise. And today, I'm here to keep it. Will you still marry me?" She pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to speak, only nodding, over and over. "Yes," she whispered. "I've been waiting for you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the sun began to set, bathing the fields in gold. NHI clapped her hands, her laughter echoing through the quiet evening. And there, under the same sky where it all began, they finally stood together, not as two people divided by time, but as one love that had survived it. Because true love doesn't wait for the right moment, it creates one, and for James and Deep, that moment had finally come.